Hi friends! Welcome back to another art journal spread. This is my journal made from a Pocky cookie box and filled with junk papers. This is my color palette for today. It's a pretty stormy looking color palette. It's a sunny day out here, but we're going to do a stormy scene anyway, just because the colors dictate it. I'm going to start by using my gelatos and put some gray into the background. I thought for a while about doing acrylic in the background or watercolor. I decided I wanted to use a stencil in the background, and so I thought I'll use my gelatos and then take some color away with the stencil, which sounded like a good plan at the time, but ended up posing some problems. I'm using the baby wipe just to smear the color around so it's not so chalky looking. I really like using gelatos on watercolor paper and absorbent papers, but when you use them on gessoed paper, it kind of is difficult. It comes off the paper really easily, and in order to get the dark color that I wanted, I had to go over again. And it doesn't absorb into the page, obviously, because of the gesso, so it it's like a waxy buildup sitting on the top of the paper. And you'll see later on, it's really difficult to make marks over. This page was a glossy page from a catalog or something, and I did put 2 coats of gesso on it, but I'm not going to put any of these glossy pages in future journals just because they're so hard to work with. Even gessoing the pages doesn't guarantee that it's not going to just come right off. I've had several instances where I swiped at it and took everything off right down to the page. I do have another journal after this one filled with junk papers already made, and I'm really hoping I did not put in too many glossy papers. So now I have my background laid down, and I'm going to take this stencil and my baby wipe and just pull some of the color off. This is a really neat technique, and I like it a lot. It's just hard to draw over top of the gelatos. And unfortunately, once I started working on the foreground of this piece, you really couldn't see the stencil in the background anyway. But it was still a learning experience. I'm going to take a piece of scrapbook paper, and this really wasn't quite the bright red that I was looking for, but it was close enough and kind of the closest I had. I actually don't have a lot of reds in scrapbook papers. I'm not sure why. I have all sorts of colors, but they don't put a lot of reds in. At least not the ones that I already have. So I'm using the scrapbook paper, and I'm going to make an umbrella. And I decided this was way too big for what I wanted, so I had to erase it. And I know there are a lot of artists who do videos and they draw everything perfectly the first time. I am not one of those people whatsoever. I actually don't like to draw a whole lot because it does take me several tries to get what I want. Even here, getting the shape I want, I still have to erase. I'm sure people who practice drawing a lot don't have to do this kind of thing, but I just don't care for drawing too much. It's kind of weird to be an artist that doesn't like to draw, but here we are. I do get there in the end. It just takes effort. This is why they call it artwork, after all. I think that turned out super cute. So I've got the top of my umbrella, and I decided I wanted to make the handle match. So I'm using the same paper to cut the handle out. And this one I'm just free-forming. It's just a J shape, not too difficult. I'm going to make a puddle at the bottom, and I started with an alcohol marker, but I did not like the color gray. This gray was a bit green, and I didn't like it, so I decided to use acrylic paints instead. I started with a Payne's gray and added some white, but this gray turned out too blue. So then I added a little bit of black. I finally got the dark gray that I wanted. Mixing colors can be difficult sometimes. You really have to be able to see the undertones and figure out how to balance them. It's a lot of trial and error. I'm taking a little bit of black and just darkening the lower edge of the puddle. That makes it look like it's sitting on the page and not floating on the page. Now I'm adding raindrops. I just kind of wanted the hint of rain and not actual drops. Again, this is just part of the background. So I don't want them too dark. This is partly to lighten up the raindrops, partly to add a little bit of highlights, and partly to just make it blend more into the background. My trusty Elmer's glue. I can never get it all the way open on the first try. I don't know why I don't just twist it all the way open. Well, I know why I don't twist it all the way open. I don't do that because then you get way too much glue. But you have to twist it almost all the way open to get it to come out at all. Every single time. So I took my white Stabilo pencil and was just figuring out where I want to put the handle for the umbrella. I find it's always best to sketch out lines in something that's not permanent before you do them in a permanent medium, because it's so easy to have it look like a straight line when you're starting and then find out it's wonky. So here you can see I'm having difficulty getting the acrylic ink to actually get onto the page. It just kind of scraped into the waxy surface of the gelatos and wasn't really making a mark. It was easier on the left side of the page than the right side, and again, I think it's because of that glossy paper. This is a piece of watercolor paper, and I'm using my watercolor paints to make some rubber duckies. These are, I think they're Artist Loft watercolors. I basically got the cheapest ones I could find. Yeah, they're Artist Loft. They get the job done. They're not the best watercolor paints I've ever used, for sure. I mean, you do get what you pay for. I do have plans to get other watercolor sets in the future. Right now it doesn't really pay for me to get new watercolors because all I have are gessoed papers. I have journals, I have 2 journals made up that have mixed media paper. And I'll be able to use my watercolors more then, so that's probably when I'll get different watercolor sets. I'm using my ink pens, and again, it's really difficult to write on the gelatos. This pen just gave out on me completely. I had to throw it away. It's the second one this week. And also 2 ballpoint pens this week. I'm not sure what the deal is, but everything just got used up this week. It was very bizarre. You can see I'm still having difficulty writing over the gelatos. It was extremely frustrating. It wasn't perfect, but definitely much easier on this left side of the page. Because the surface wasn't glossy, I was able to use the baby wipe a lot more and get it to blend better and not leave such a waxy finish. Now the duckies can see. I'm just outlining. I'm kind of a big fan of outlining things. Gives them a lot of definition. When I first started doing art, I was doing fine art and art competitions, and the rule was don't outline, never outline your things. And so I never did, but honestly, I really like it. And since I'm not doing quote unquote serious art that's meant for galleries and museums, I feel free to outline whatever the heck I want. Honestly, that's what art should be. Forget the rules, do whatever you want. That's the best part about art. Art has no rules. That's why it's art. I've spent my whole life following rules, and yeah, it's okay. It gets the job done, but it's not really any fun. Art's supposed to be fun. So I'm putting in some raindrops, and I had my jelly roll trying to add some highlights in there, but again, it wasn't working very well over the gelatos. So I used my acrylic paint marker instead, and still had problems. Now here I decided the background was just too dark, too busy. You couldn't see the raindrops very well. It was really hard to see the stencil pattern anyway, and so I decided to use the baby wipe and take a lot of that off. I did want to have more variation in the lightness and darkness in the background. But mostly I thought it was just kind of depressing having it so dark gray. So then I had to go in and fix my raindrops because I smeared them. Spent way too much time on these raindrops. They were supposed to be just simple, quick things. It's funny how that works out sometimes. And speaking of spending way too much time on things, now I'm going to add my sentiment, and oh yeah, this took a while. I decided to stamp two of the words and handwrite two of the words. The stamping process was frustrating. I finally got my word on there. And when I stamped it, the letters were way too far apart, and that was the closest I could get them together. And the N, I wanted kind of a script, not calligraphy, cursive font, but the N almost looks like a W. So I thought, well, the letters are too far apart, so I decided to stamp them one at a time and do them closer and see if that would help. It's better, but I still did not like it. I just did not like that N. Third time's the charm. I decided to use the Times New Roman style N rather than the cursive N. And I finally figured out that if I took the stamp and if I took the letter and put it on the desk and then pressed the acrylic block on top of it, it was so much easier than trying to put the letter directly on the acrylic block and have it just fall off. If you use a lot of these stamps, you're probably like, duh, but you know, it's my new discovery, so I'm passing it on. I finally got the letters stamped. So now I'm going to use my ink pen and just write in the last two words. Dance in the rain. The paper that I stamped this on is just it's an unlined note card. I had to buy them for something or other, and I ended up using two of them, and I had this whole stack of note cards left, and I thought, what am I going to do with them? But I end up stamping my sentiments on them a lot and writing my sentiments. They actually work really well. I like them a lot. Just putting some shadow with my Stabilo pencil. Then I couldn't decide which side I wanted to put the shadow on, and I decided finally to put it on the inside. So off camera, I did add some jelly roll waves to my little puddles there around the duckies. And that's it. My spread is complete. I hope you liked it. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.